October 10th of the Israeli and Palestinian territories map, also known as the Gaza-Israel War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and practical approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in this region, and to the map, as the war enters its fourth day following the initial incursions by the Hamas militant group from Gaza into Israel. And the Hamas group of which effectively governs the Gaza Strip after taking control of it violently against other factions back in 2007. Then as for the most recent developments on the map, just about 2 hours ago, Hamas claimed responsibility for a rocket attack on Beersheba in Israel, which is about 40 kilometers or about 25 miles southeast of Gaza. No injuries were reported. Then at the nearby settlement of Rahat, police killed a militant near the settlement, although it was feared that another suspect escaped from the scene. And then Hamas also launched a missile from the Gaza Strip which hit the Abu Ghush Mosque near Jerusalem a short time ago, which is in fact a Muslim mosque that they would likely have preferred not to hit. And then so it should be noted at this point that the situation could expand the war to a second front in the north, as Israel reported the loss of 3 soldiers in skirmishes along the Lebanese border. A lieutenant colonel, a Druze soldier, and a deputy commander were among the fallen. There was also anti-tank missiles launched from the Lebanese territory towards Israel, but no casualties were reported in that incident there. As such, the Israeli military has been sending large numbers of reinforcements to the Lebanese border. Now, specifically, the threat from the north is largely coming from the Hezbollah militants, which is a Shiite militant and political organization based in Lebanon. And while the Hezbollah does not have outright control over the government in Lebanon, it does have significant political influence within the country and does also have a significant presence in the southern Lebanon region where it borders with Israel. As such, in response to other recent launches detected a short time ago from the Lebanese territory towards Israel, the Israeli army forces are now responding with some artillery fire. Now, Israeli officials called the initial invading attack by Hamas as being the worst single day in the country's history. Israel also called it the largest single day of loss of life for Jewish people since the Holocaust. And they've concluded this from now countless examples, too many of which to mention, although more and more video and photographic releases have since come to light after those initial hours of the attack on Saturday, with examples including Hamas militants raiding Israeli homes, killing pet dogs, and setting fires to homes as well, and they were very much not shy to expose their own engagements of this caliber as they filmed it all themselves. There was also instances including a couple that concealed their 10-month-old twins in a closet during a Hamas intrusion, sacrificing their lives to shield their children. So tragically, the parents perished, but Israeli forces discovered the surviving babies 14 hours later. Then also, a survivor of what's now being dubbed the Israel Party Massacre explained how Hamas lined up rows of party people against the wall and how they executed everyone except him. And believe me, I'm not going for shock and awe with these examples, but I have already received multiple messages already giving me feedback on how I haven't done justice as yet to the atrocities and complete savagery performed by the terrorizing Hamas forces. And so, briefly in that vein, I'll also mention that Israeli army spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari said that the military has notified the families of 50 Israelis being held hostage in the Gaza Strip by Hamas, and that more families will be contacted as the military verifies the information. There was even the noted incident of 18-year-old Natalie Renan and mother Judith Renan among the US citizens from Chicago that were kidnapped by Hamas and held hostage in Gaza. They were abducted while visiting relatives in the country. And so, looking around the world, it's not just the Hamas fighters being televised, but also the supporters putting themselves on display globally. For instance, in my own country land, for example, in Sydney, where crowds of Hamas supporters gathered in front of the Opera House, chanting some really heinous language that included gas the Jews. But don't be too quick to call out Australia, because episodes of this magnitude were reported in many other Western nations, including Times Square of New York City, various cities in Europe, the Israeli embassy in London, and even in Helsinki of Finland. And in some cases, there were also Israeli supporters in the same cities, causing both sides to clash in some instances. Now, I do want to switch gears for a moment and show you an example of the intricate network of underground tunnels utilized by Hamas in Gaza, some of which have been dubbed rocket towers as they fire from these underground locations. But taking a look at this setup that the militant group appears to be somewhat quite proud of filming, it just does not look at all like your most efficient setup by any stretch of the imagination. And it's also quite likely that Israeli intelligence has a fair understanding of the constructed networks, especially, of course, those set in stone launching positions. I suppose, no pun intended. Then, speaking of the IDF, intensive Israeli raids on sites northeast, southwest, and central of the Gaza Strip were carried out in the last day as well. Now, a spokesman for the Hamas group stated that if Israel does not stop the airstrikes, then Hamas will start to execute hostages. Although the dichotomy faced here, or situation really, might not be as black and white as that sounds, as hostages are more often than not kept alive as a form of leverage or collateral. And add to that, the fact that hostages do exist in Gaza, Israeli hostages, likely gives more of a reason for Israel to place their IDF ground forces within Gaza at some point. Then, as for the Israeli political view, well, Prime Minister Netanyahu delivered a speech in English, effectively mentioning that Israel won't back down, saying that, quote, Israel is at war, Israel didn't start this war, but Israel will end it. He also later added that Hamas are animals and ISIS. Also, Israel has mobilized an unprecedented 300,000 reservists in response to the multi-front Hamas attacks from Gaza and is shifting to an offensive stance as announced by the chief military spokesperson in the last day. And you might be asking the question at this point, are Hamas militants running rampant around Israeli streets right now? Well, not really, as it appears to instead be rocket fire from the Gaza Strip now more than anything. And in an interesting turn of events, last night Hamas appeared to be in talks with Israel to free Israeli women and children hostages in exchange for the release of 36 Palestinian women and children from Israeli jails, as reported by Reuters. And I would definitely take that kind of a deal. But even more recently, in a potential sign of a faltering stance by the Hamas government, last night some of those officials stated that they were open to discussions over setting a truce with Israel. But I wouldn't necessarily hold my breath on that one just yet, as Ismail Haniyeh, one of the most senior and prominent figures of Hamas, stated, quote, "We no longer want to see you on this land," as he reportedly also called for more violence. But these are words that are actually not really backed up with true confidence and strength, given that he actually resides in Qatar and watches the war from the comfort of his own home or office. And as for his backstory, he's actually been synonymous with the resistance movement in Palestine for about 2 decades. But as for my small editorial comment on this, Qatar, really? It's tantamount to being in a luxuriously protected bunker, realistically, as he's not really privy to any experiences of the real chaos at the front, and many do submit that he should travel back to Gaza. So to close out the video, it still really marvels me the geography of this war. So different to many other wars, and not in terms of land ratios, that's pretty common as we've seen, but rather in terms of physical size, as every square kilometer could theoretically be surveilled by Israel if it so chooses with an MQ-9 Reaper drone that flies at 50,000 feet above. And yes, Israel does in fact have the Reaper UAV, whereas the Hamas organization does not really possess much in the way of advanced anti-aircraft air defense systems like those maintained by larger and more well-established military forces. Instead, groups in Gaza have relied on a combination of smaller and less advanced weapons such as shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missiles and machine guns to target lower-flying aircraft or drones. So that will be it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching, thanks for your support and all of your kind words for this channel, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.